Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Digital Transformation World Research Spotlight, a path to revenue growth. My name is Mark Newman. I'm Chief Analyst at TM Forum, and I'm co-hosting this session with my colleague, Dean Ramsey. Hi, Dean.
Hi Mark, hi everyone.
So Dean and I actually we are today we're in the studio for the Digital Transformation World event. So we're just taking time out from the main stage just to bring you this session. We will be breaking with you a couple of minutes before the end just to rush back to the main session. We're very much looking forward to spending the next hour with you. As you can see, we have a number of other friendly faces on the screen today. So we're delighted to be joined by our sponsors. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. Thank you very much to Blue Prism, to Netcracker, to Huawei, to InfoVista, to VaultDB, to EPAM, to Digital Route, and good afternoon to you all. So good afternoon, Bob, Ari, Clark, Franco, Dheeraj, Alex, Stephen, and we'll be talking to you all over the next hour or so. So thank you very much indeed for joining us today. So that's the basic running order. So how we're going to run this session is that Dean and I have been spending an awful lot of time the last few months working on what I think it's fair to say is the most ambitious research program that I've certainly undertaken in my time at TM Forum the last 5 years. I'll lead Dean to talk through the specifics of that research project, but it has been a huge project. We've been in it for about 4 to 5 months, pretty solid. We will have a report coming out. We think it's going to be next week. So the report's in final stage of production now. Report will be out next week. You will all get access to that report, and so that will be made available to you. We'd love to hear what you think of the research. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll be bringing you the highlights of that report in our time this afternoon. So there we are. So there are all those wonderful faces that you just said hello to. As I say, we'll be joining those at different times during the session this afternoon. So Dean, I know it's a very tight session today, so I think we'll get started. So I think in terms of the agenda, so we're going to run through the highlights from the report, from the research, and intersperse, I say, with commentary from our industry colleagues. Just before I move on, just a word about our sponsors. We can bring you this research because of our sponsors. And so we are eternally grateful for those of you who help us to be able to manage to put this research out. Without your support, we wouldn't be able to produce this research. So thank you so much indeed for getting involved in this project. We very much hope it's worth your while. Okay, so Dean, over to you. Maybe I'll just leave you just to walk through the research program, what it's entailed.
Yep, great, thank you, Mark. So what we wanted to do with this research project is, instead of starting from a starting point of a bunch of assumptions about how revenue growth is going in the industry, how ARPUs are dropping off, the usual things that you hear, we wanted to do a very current data collection and a financial analysis, so that we had a very kind of up-to-date set of data, because many of the B2B growth areas that we're tracking that's happening quite quickly, and we want to see hotspots coming up quickly, and we don't want to use old data. So this financial analysis that we've been doing for the last couple of months, it came in two parts really. What we wanted to do is, from the data, we want to be able to have comparisons about the size and growth rates for anything that we can identify in new lines of business and new business models. So we looked at 32, I think, of the world's the world's largest operator groups, and their financial results for the period 2018 to 2020. So the first part of that is we trawled through a lot of annual financial reports to collect data around the growth of specific B2B segments. We did a deep dive into the revenue splits for lines of business for security, IoT, cloud services, TV services, pay TV, and payments.
Yeah, payments, yeah.
we looked at the revenues, the growth, and looked at those as a percentage of total revenues, so we can get an idea of how that compares to traditional telco connectivity services. So the other side of this data collection was a 20-question survey that we issued to operators, predominantly to technology people and line of business people. And these questions were centered around what these people believe the line of business growth is, where it's coming from inside their organization, and what they're seeing from their customers. So what impact they believe technology advancements like 5G have on their ability to diversify their business models, looking at some specific vertical industries, and asking our respondents' opinions where they see the potential around those areas. We also asked a few questions about architectures and technology decisions, and how these explicit choices are allowing them to exploit opportunities. So we can look at growth expectations, really.
And I think one of our starting points in this research was that we're all very excited about the potential of new technologies, be it 5G, edge, cloud, IoT.
Yeah.
They remain very much the future, and it's not really the present. But the present is the telcos, B2B businesses. So we wanted to look at the current state of telco B2B business and look at how they're doing both overall in terms of B2B, those individual segments, and to see whether what we're seeing in terms of those new areas demonstrates a path towards growth, and try to bridge the gap between that and this hope around 5G and edge. And I think we all feel there's probably not been enough specificity around how telcos monetize these new capabilities. So it was, as Dean said at the start, it's trying to have some real numbers which we can use to justify our arguments, if you like.
Yeah.
The other point that I make before diving in, this is really some top-level highlights. We just decided in the last week we're going to run another session. So we're going to run a session, I think, on November 9th, I think we said, Dean. We're on a second session with some more findings of the research. We're going to bring in our sponsor colleagues again to add their different contributions, because we think there's so much we're not going to be able to cover today. So you'll all get an invitation to that. I say it's been penciled in for November 9. Anything else I've missed, Dean, in terms of the research program, or shall I move on?
Just one point I'd like to make is that I think the data that we collected, it represented a group of operators which represent about 70% of the revenue, service revenue in the industry. So lots of the analysis was based on a data model that we produced. So because of the disparities in the way that operators report and the way that they look at profitability and things like that, it's not possible to be able to build a financial model that shows all those things. So what we did is we stuck to things where we had solid numbers, where we could analyze real growth. And so in our consolidated model, some of the data is modeled, but it's based on kind of real world solid research.
And some of the numbers we'll be showing you are sort of modeled numbers. So we are not currently in the forecast business. We don't spend a huge amount of time building forecast models, but we wanted to show some trends. So looking at, if you were to see a continuation of that growth trend from 2018 to 2020, what might this business look like in 3 years' time? So we've endeavored to be totally transparent as to where we get the numbers from and how representative they are. Okay, so let's dive in. So why CS believe B2B is the answer to revenue growth? So this happened at some stage over the last 3, 4, 5 years, that the industry has switched its focus into B2B. And that, I think, is partly because of 5G, looking at where can 5G make a difference. It's partly also, I think, around general belief around digital transformation of businesses globally. And so telcos believe that they can derive revenues from the transformation of businesses globally. So that's a widely held view, I'd say, across most telcos. When you actually look at total telco B2B revenues, I think of those 31, 32 operators, I think we found 17 give us pretty clear breakdowns of B2B numbers. We saw some growth. I think it's 3.5% between 2018 and 2019. 2019, 2020, 3.5% decline. Unfortunately, we pick a period that was probably not ideal because of the global pandemic. So yeah, I would say pay more attention to the growth 2018, 2019 and decline 2019, 2020. So I think it's our belief that the B2B business is growing relatively modestly, but it is growing.
I think
so that was interesting. Sorry, Dean.
I think it's worth saying that the B2C side of the business was in slight decline before the pandemic, and then it was hit by the pandemic too. So that those revenues were in decline, but B2B before was actually in growth to about the tune of about 3.5%.
So when it comes to thinking about the B2B business, we took a really hard look at what exactly is it that telcos are selling. And we kind of realized that it's three things. It's network, it's access to network services. It's reselling, could be reselling software, could be reselling hardware. That's an integral part of the B2B business. Indeed, it's an integral part of, I guess, B2C if you look at devices. And then it's services. And services is this very broad category, which goes all the way from traditional managed network services all the way into professional services in new areas. And I think that when we think about IoT, security, cloud, a lot of that business is services, professional services. And so we spent some time in research thinking about EBITDA margins across those different parts of business. So the core telco business, telco EBITDA, maybe mid-30s%. If we look at the services businesses, telcos don't break out their EBITDA for their services businesses. Well, very few do anyway. But even the most successful professional services firms are making an EBITDA margin of about 20%. So it's a lower EBITDA margin than telco's core business. We believe that telco EBITDA margin in services is actually a lot lower than 20%. It's probably half of that or even less than that. So that's an interesting starting point of thinking about these new services. On the one hand, we're saying growth is all IoT, security, and cloud, but is that services? What is the margin? Is the question. So another area we thought about a lot is connectivity and how telcos think about connectivity. And it's interesting that on the one hand, we talk about connectivity being a commodity. How many times have we all heard people say connectivity is a commodity? But then you start to think, well, hang on a minute, isn't network slicing really just more customized, more useful connectivity? So yeah, when we think about 5G and new services, are we talking about growth in connectivity? And then you start thinking about, well, how do you monetize that better connectivity and service? Do you monetize it by selling more of it or higher prices? And that applies both to the B2B and I think to the B2C space. One of the other ways we wanted to think about B2B was to base it on what type of telecoms company you are. And I think while in the consumer space, many operators look at the B2C market in a similar way and have a similar strength in the B2C market, particularly around mobile services. When it comes to B2B, the market is very fragmented and there's a concentration of power among a relatively small number of players. So we identified 4 categories of telco and we called them defenders. These are mainly the incumbents with a lot of enterprise customers going back 50, 70, 80 years. They're challengers, and we identified challengers as being second operators. It could be a T-Mobile USA, it could be a Vodafone. So big players that started off in mobile that have since become powerful in enterprise as well. Then we thought about prospectors, which are the sort of 4th and 5th operators who are probably not doing much in B2B. They're looking at where there may be opportunities in B2B. And there's specialists who are companies who are specifically focused on B2B in a broad sector or narrow sector. Now, the reason that we wanted to think about growth in these different paradigms is that if you are a defender operator, if you're an incumbent, your B2B revenues would go down every year if you did nothing. And that's because the core communications business, indeed the core connectivity business, is stagnating. So if you sit there and do nothing as a defender, you may lose 5% of revenues per year. So growth for you is being able to stand still and hopefully grow a little bit. If on the other hand, you're a challenger operator, you probably don't have the same existing strength and history in B2B as a defender operator, but it's all incremental growth because you didn't have very much in the first place. And that incremental growth also applies to prospectors, although they might decide it's too much of a challenge into the marketplace. So if we relate that, this core theme here, which is a path to revenue growth, it does kind of depend on who you are, how much legacy you have. Because in practice, much of these growth areas are compensating for decline in the core. And to cut to the chase here, the question is, can you grow your new areas more quickly than you lose business in your legacy areas? That's the race that everybody's up against. So another way that we thought about B2B was segmentation. So traditionally, telcos have addressed the market based on the segment, be it a SOHO, an SME, a mid-size, a large size, an MNC. And again, when you think about growth, you might think about the traditional segmentation, or you might think about verticalization as well. And I think the key point here around verticalization versus horizontalization is that while many telcos are seeking to explore new use cases in enterprises, to get very close to the customer, what you don't want as a telco is to develop vertical use cases, vertical products that you cannot scale. So ideally, what you want is horizontalized products that can then be sold into and maybe customized for different verticals. And that last point there, from use cases to business cases, Dean and I as analysts, we've been talking about use cases for quite a long time. And what we really want to see now is business cases rather than use cases. So the last discussion there around business models and value chains, I talked a little bit about connectivity. If you're expanding beyond connectivity, what are you doing? Are you building a platform capability? Do you see your network as a platform, or is a platform something specific to a new area of business, such as IoT, for example? End-to-end services, we tend to think of this more in areas where telcos maybe make acquisitions in a certain space. So you might acquire someone who's strong in the automotive sector, and you can write end-to-end services. So again, when we think about this core issue of growth, where are you positioning yourself? Where are you in connectivity? Where are you in platform? Where are you in end-to-end services? You may well be a combination of those different things based on different verticals. I've put down here service orchestration because when we think about these business models, one of the ones being discussed is telcos being able to orchestrate different moving parts, and it could be the different parts that they control. So orchestrating classic telco services, it could also be orchestrating a larger partner ecosystem. Just looking at that image there, so best service categories for growth, security and IoT, almost neck and neck. I think it's fair to say that security is a term that we've heard a lot more over the last few years. So we'll be coming back to that. Right, at this stage, I just want to bring in a couple of our sponsors. So maybe, Alex, maybe I can turn to you. So Alex, I know that the work you do at EPAM, you look at a number of different new products, new service areas, B2C, B2B. Do you see any clear direction in terms of what telcos are pursuing, or is it still very much that experimentation phase?
So, I mean, I think we're challenging a lot of our customers, and we're working with them to support the challenge that they're facing in becoming much more of an ecosystem service provider. So just building on all of the things that you've said about how do we move beyond connectivity, how do we develop the professional services? And furthermore, actually, are they professional services or are they digital products and digital services? Yeah. So do they need to be more insight and data led? So the things that we're considering are do telcos have the right to play as an aggregator in an overall ecosystem? So the trusted provider of, apps and partnerships and connectivity providers, maybe their own, maybe other third parties, and aggregating all of that data in a way that it's relevant and useful for both their customers and their partners. And I think that's partly the key into unlocking new revenues, because we always talk about where does the value sit, and is there value still in the connectivity layer, or is it further up the chain? And almost being a custodian or an aggregator of the data, the telcos are then able to provide more insightful outcome-led kind of digital products, as it were, rather than the horizontals that you were discussing. So moving beyond a specific horizontal product and more into a ecosystem that people can subscribe to, and they can both take outcomes from, depending on their kind of business model and the horizontal.
And I guess to do what you're suggesting, Alex, often it goes against how telcos have grown up, how they evolved, and so it's a cultural challenge, you often say, as well as being a technology challenge. Very much so, and I think that's what we're finding. Actually, we talk about 5G and IoT being future investments and future revenues, but what we're trying to do is enable all of this now. So it's new business models, it's new culture, it's new processes, it's new technology, but there are short-term wins that we're managing to find as well. So across the different market segments, but there still are opportunities. Thank you very much, Alex. Stephen, maybe if I can just bring you in here. So I know at Digital Route, we've spoken to you before about your belief around B2B, B2B2X. Well, your story is also around leveraging data. So when you speak to operators, again, do you see a clear direction in terms of where telcos want to go in terms of these new services?
Yeah, well, we see. Hi, Mark. How do we see two levels of challenges really being faced, which we come upon quite regularly. The first one is, I suppose, to be called a monetization dilemma, to want of another word. And we see the CSPs at different stages on how they're going to address that new opportunity for B2B type services. Obviously, they're absolutely focused on protecting their OCS, their current charging system, to make sure they don't disrupt their current BSS in the process of moving towards a more B2B, B2B2X focused model. We also see them there, adapting current B2C charging models to try and make them ready for the new B2B to B2B and B2B2X opportunity.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, exactly. They're also faced with, don't I start thinking about taking my BSS OSS to be fully cloud native? When they're being put under pressure by their IT organizations, and then also they've got to take into consideration in the whole approach towards B2B is the hyperscale partnerships and what role will they play. I suppose the big thing is, which model do they want to take based on those considerations that they're making? Like you said, is it consumption-based connectivity as a service? Is it advanced connectivity as a service, or is it a platform as a service type model they want to go after? But I think a vote to caution there is really about telcos need to be careful not to be taking just an inside-out view on this whole opportunity, this whole challenge. Because if they're only thinking about, listen, I'm trying to push my network out to enterprise, they need to consider what our enterprise is actually looking for. And what we're really seeing is that enterprises are really now moving to, the telcos have always done usage-based subscription, usage-based services, but enterprises are just on that journey now to start innovating around usage-based services. So
Stephen, I'm going to stop you there. Sorry, I'm going to stop you there. I'm on such a tight schedule, but that's fine. Stephen, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, no worries.
Stephen, that's great, thank you. So as Dean said, we looked into verticals, IoT, security, and cloud, because that's where we saw most breakouts. So Dean, a few thoughts around IoT.
Yeah, so as Alex was saying there, the IoT is one of the things that we often consider to be kind of a future model, but it's actually happening now. The chart on on the right shows that there's quite a lot of revenue already in IoT, and there is some growth. So, you know, several operators like China Mobile, AT&T, Vodafone are just about hitting the $1 billion a year mark in IoT services. So, you know, there's quite a lot of growth too, and there's an awful lot of growth in the number of connections. A lot of it's coming from China. So due to the wide variation in types of products and services under the IoT banner, operators are addressing this with deploying an agile platform model from which they can launch many different things, many different flavors of IoT services. So we're in this phase now where we're seeing operator groups favoring different industry verticals and developing a real focus on some specializations where they see the most potential growth. The pandemic did affect IoT a little. You know, there is a situation where, because of the devices, there's lots of field work to be done for IoT deployments, and so, you know, not being able to have engineers go out there and deploy those devices had hit the 2020 numbers slightly. Is there an opportunity for CSPs beyond connectivity? I think this is a really interesting point in the IoT conversation. I think the elephant in the room for operators is the nature of the IoT value chain. It's not really best suited for mobile network operators to take a leading role and be the dominant winner of that total service revenue. The connectivity portion of the value chain is currently maybe 5% of the total. So we're seeing applications and application enablement platforms that constitutes maybe 40%. And then the modules and devices in the hardware portion is quite a big chunk. It's like 55% of the total value chain. So operators are looking to widen their influence and build their influence out into the value chain. And I think probably the place where they're most likely to do that is in the software side, in the applications.
So in terms of those numbers, Dean, so 5% of values in connectivity, 80 to 90% of telco IoT revenues are in connectivity. Yes. So that service bit is growing. It's growing, but not growing as quickly as we would like, and I think we need to think about that. I'm going to move on. So right. Security. So at Team Forum, you know, Dean and I, we haven't actually put out much research on security because, but it's growing. So just at the event this morning, everyone is talking about being trusted, secure networks. It seems to be the term that everybody is now using: security in a cloud world, security in an open world. And I think when we think about the security market, the question I ask myself is this a separate standalone market where you can sell security services, cybersecurity services to, you know, medium, large size companies, or it's something that sits with cloud and with network? And the answer is, I think it's both. And so we see many telcos out there who have made acquisitions in security firms. And this business is being grown off the back of acquisitions. Let's make no bones about that. All the leading players have made large acquisitions. Typically, they're buying a cybersecurity company. They're then taking their products and bundling them into the big ticket infrastructure projects they sell to their large customers. But those businesses are carrying on selling cybersecurity services to medium and large enterprises. That's quite an interesting model in terms of how you acquire a company, let it run, but take in, but also push its products to your large customers. You know, so I think in practice, because so much of revenue is built around acquisition, that we're seeing maybe 5-10 telcos with quite big security businesses generating, you know, $500 million, $1 billion a year through acquisitions. Other players probably can take more of a partnering approach, I would guess. So that was interesting. So I think our growth numbers, we've kind of assumed across the broad telco market, I think probably a less strong growth than just the telcos we looked at. Now, I want to bring in Dheeraj. So Dheeraj, are you there, Dheeraj? I hope you're still there. So
yes, I am.
Dheeraj at VaultDB. So when I was messaging Dheeraj before the session day, you know, Dheeraj talked about, you know, security as an enabler, and I've been talking about security as a new service. But I think you have some strong thoughts around how you need to be secure, just that as a platform for growth at any new business that you're building.
Absolutely. So the fundamental thing is like the reason that you are actually hearing so much about secure networks is that not all press is good press in some cases, right? So if you're in entertainment business, yes, all publicity is good publicity, but you don't want to be in the news because of a breach or lost data or lost connectivity or downtime and things like that, right? So, and we've been working with many security solution providers outside of telecom, but we're seeing that trend coming into the telecom industry itself. One of the key factors that we're seeing is it's not static set of rules, right? So it's always dynamic, it's evolving needs for securing, and the threat surface area and threat patterns are all evolving. So you need like a dynamic system that needs to be able to take in what you're learning on a continuous basis from your data and be able to incorporate it. Because this is a requirement, being a separate product becomes questionable approach, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it should be an integral part of all of your business processes, because at every step of the way, you are exposing yourself to a potential threat. So that actually explains some of the parts that you were covering, like, is it a separate business or integral of all future connectivity requirements? And I feel like it's the latter. It's going to be an integral part. So from that
I guess the answer is, Jiraj, whatever helps telcos make more money, I guess is the answer. And maybe it can be both. Maybe it's integral part of network and cloud and something separate.
Right.
But it certainly is a big topic. Jiraj, lots of thoughts. That's great. Thank you.
Yep.
So the last of these three product categories looked at is cloud, and this is, there's a whole separate discussion around what exactly do operators bundle into this category. But Dean, some thoughts around cloud and telco revenue growth.
Yeah, it's a really interesting sector, actually. It's a gathering pace, and it's a growth area for operators, much higher than core business, obviously. So the year-on-year growth between 2019 and 2020 was about 21% year-on-year, so to about $15 billion. So, there's some gathering pace there. Typical cloud services are based around secure WAN, for enterprise and small to medium businesses, and in doing that, they're utilizing the scalability and speed of setup that cloud offers. So with many operators migrating their own IT workloads to the cloud, in the process of that, they've built up a large pool of skills with their vendor partners, and that's been built up within operators. And so it's the next leap is to take all of that skills and everything that they've learned in the cloud migrations and start moving that into selling it as a service. So we're seeing all kinds of connectivity things, but we're also seeing an interaction with the hyperscaler cloud providers as operators can also become managers and orchestrators of different cloud assets for enterprises and SMBs. So there is a whole wide variation of cloud service offerings in the portfolios of the companies that we looked at. But generally, they're all built out of this set of core competencies that have just come into the industry, really. So it's interesting to see that operators are pulling together a monetizable solution set from kind of basically new skills. So one of the problems that we're seeing at the moment is just the amount of the right people within the industry and skill sets, and there's a real lack of getting the right people, from an IT centric grad background, and in that discipline they're in competition with AWS and Azure to get these people together. So we think that the growth is sustainable, but there are lots of potential barriers in the kind of staffing these new business units.
And I think the point we should make here is, we report the numbers operators give us, and you can bundle different things into. So a lot of the clouds are probably quite traditional, cloud hosting. There's a lot more modern new stuff as well. I guess anything which is edge cloud, that's going to be in there as well. So that's interesting. So there's definitely an issue around categorization within that discussion.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So as I say, we chose those three areas because they're the ones that operators split out. We do a little bit more work in the report looking at other areas as well beyond those three categories. Consumer services. So the question we're asking ourselves here is, how do we feel about the growth of the consumer market? And if we look at the world over the last 5 years, 10 years, there have been two big stories in consumer. Stories have been bundling accesses, fixed, mobile, bundling that with TV. They've been the two main stories. So, the provocative question is, have we now reached peak TV and peak bundling? Certainly, when we ran our numbers on TV, it looks as if we have got to peak TV. I think we see many telcos now questioning whether they should be committing to acquiring expensive sports rights, which might stop them from investing in building out fibre, for example. That's certainly a story within the UK market. And I think the reality is that the pay TV business was a great business to be in 10 years ago when telcos first started out. It's now not such a great business. We've been challenged by the video platforms. I think when it comes to bundling is absolutely a big part of the present and the future. But bundling does actually end up, you could argue, destroying total value, because effectively you're getting products discounted. So when I put down here, can telcos turbocharge partnering and bundling? I think we haven't spoken much about partnering in this discussion, but part of the thing here is, can you as a telco have multiple partnerships and offer multiple services? That might be a way of growing through bundling. 5G, can you charge more for 5G? I think, well, could you charge more for 4G? I guess the question. I think we know there might be a short period when you could charge more for 4G. That tended to disappear. When we look at 5G today, it's difficult to make a strong case, but, and there is a but here, we believe there is potential for thinking about 5G as it's fibre in the air, it's temporary connections, it's resilience and backup. So we do think that there might be some inherent characteristics that give you 5G maybe more quickly, more cheaply than fibre. It means that there may be a growth in the volume of connectivity. As I said at the start, there's this broader discussion around connectivity as a service, network slicing. Can you charge more money for that? We asked some interesting questions in the survey about how you make money from better connectivity. That last point about mobile payments, the reason that we've looked at mobile payments is because I didn't quite appreciate this, but if you look at certainly the African telecoms market, mobile payments is an established core telco service. And particularly for Orange, for Airtel, for MTN, for Vodacom, it's a line of business. And it's probably been the most successful diversification that telcos have had. You might have said it was TV was the biggest success story. I think currently you might well say payments are. May only be 4, 5, 6%, but it's growing quite rapidly in many markets. So I think that those graphs at the right-hand side there suggest that when you speak to the industry says it thinks there's probably more growth potential in consumer in B2B than in consumer. Okay, revenue growth enablers. This is a big topic. I really can't do it justice here. I'm going to ask some of my colleagues on the call to do this more justice than I can do. But when we think about growth enablers, there's this term operating model that's being used a lot now. Do you have the right governance in place? Do you have you make the right technology choices? Operating model is really creating it's the how-to. So that's a big discussion. When you have lines of business, how do you run these new lines of business? Do you run them as integral parts of the company, or do you run them as almost standalone autonomous businesses? Are there hybrid models? And my observation is that we're seeing more telcos currently devolving different lines of business than there are telcos absorbing lines of business. So some of that's in areas such as, I guess, outsourcing or selling off your towers, but also it might be selling off stakes in your Telefonica tech business, for example. Understanding where you are in the value chain, clearly essential. Partnerships, I can't talk enough about partnerships. Telcos need to treat their partners like their customers, and the BSS they put in place and the OSS for their business and their customers needs to be in place for their partners as well. Giving customers control of connectivity, we hear this all the time from enterprises. A short nod there to question around agile procurement technology partnerships. We did a piece of research 2 years ago about how telcos need to move to more agile procurement, and we're not seeing the progress we would like in that regard. We still think there's potential for more, as I say, agile procurement, and part of that is also thinking of expenditure as OPEX rather than just CAPEX, thinking about something as a cost of sale. You know, if you as a telco want to prosper in, for example, the mobile private network business, you need to be able to sell that and then build it. So selling and then building is not part of the traditional telco culture. So there's some very broad comments around enablers. Now, I want to spend just a few minutes thinking about IT requirements for revenue growth. And I'm going to ask Ari. Ari from Netcrack, can I bring you in first, Ari? So I appreciate that I'm only giving you 3 minutes, Ari, but can you give some sort of top line thoughts in terms of when we think about investment in your IT systems, where you need to be thinking about making those choices? So I'm trusting Ari is with us. I'm not seeing him on my screen, but Ari, are you there?
I am here, Mark. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Ari.
Thank you. Great question. So let me start off by saying that there's, when we talk about connectivity, right, as one of the key services, with hybrid networks, edge computing, full cloud migration, the definition of enterprise-grade connectivity is slightly changing. I mean, the operators have to move away, and we are seeing that, from selling pure network services towards selling outcomes as measured by cloud performance, security, resilience, and so on and so forth. Now, on the other hand, is the non-connectivity based services that you want to bring that together. And for that, transformation software becomes the enablers, right? Whether you want to unify your edge-based cloud services, enable monetization, and obviously automate adoption of vRAN and all those different things. Partner-centric services becomes also very, very critical. How do you bring those together? Few key things that we have observed working with some of our customers. One is there is a key consensus around moving towards a much more cloud-native architecture, especially for BSS OSS. Cloud-native, microservices-based, but also modular in nature. So it's not about operators having to be forced to buy the full stack, but they can buy modular components based on their business requirements. The other thing that we see is moving away from proprietary, costly technologies, especially when it comes to databases. The adoption of open source tools and database technologies and so on and so forth. That's becoming more and more prevalent in the RFPs and RFIs. Third, conformation to industry standards. More and more, TM Forum, the work you guys do, and other industry standard bodies, adoption of open APIs, all those other things becoming very important as well. Important part of BSS is to be able to support partner-centric services. So not just billing, charging, rating, and all of that, but also contract management, settlements, agreement management, blockchain technologies, license management, all of that part of one platform. That's becoming a key enabler when one single instance of a full stack BSS OSS is supporting multiple lines of business for operators. And last but not the least, Mark, is really about closed loop fulfillment and assurance, coming together to be able to provide them the best customer experience and enabler to meet the dynamic needs of the operators.
So Ari, I just have one question, Ari, which is that when we think about this B2B space, there are so many unanswered questions about where the value lies. How can you build a future BSS, take a new approach towards the OSS, and commit major investments without knowing where the value will lie? And is that proving a challenge to you?
So I think you have to move at the speed of business with the operators, and having the flexibility and having cloud native architecture and modular architecture helps you. Having a flexible data model becomes very important, because it's not just about telco services, but non-telco services, working with other industry verticals. How do you connect the dots? They have a different data model. How do you bring it together quickly and agile? You have to do some upfront work when we talk about partner-centric services. You cannot have always onboarding it based on what the customer is asking you. You need to do some of those work in advance, in anticipation and discussion with the broader industry and the community, and obviously your customer base, to understand where are they going, what are they trying to do. All of these becomes important. Agile co-development is becoming very, very critical. We are
Yeah.
working with many of our tier 1 customers on joint co-development project. So it's like two teams working together to create some sort of a unified, some sort of a innovative services. So all of those learnings comes together, but the flexibility of the platform, the adoption of standards, all of that become very, 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 very critical.
Harry, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Mark.
Clark, maybe I can just turn to you, Clark. So when we think about telecoms operators and their BSS requirements for 5G era, what are the key capabilities that you think telcos need?
Very good question. Okay, based on Huawei's latest best practices and technology trends, we have proposed a 5-star best billing benchmark model. We believe that the future of the monetization platform is to continuously pursue excellence from these 5 core dimensions: convergent, cloud native, agile, open, and intelligent. For convergent, Huawei now is moving towards the convergence 3.0, which means from network convergence, service convergence, and to customer convergence and architecture. The network convergence means the system needs to be able to support both 2.3, 4G, mobile, and fixed. And the service convergence is moving up from traditional 2C up to 2B and to home. And for the architectural convergence, we are moving from traditional rating, charging, billing, and also real-time settlement. 4 engines are connected with one single rating engine. Now we are talking about the customer convergence. The system must be able to support both the people and things. The data model can adapt to different type of services and support the future moving of new business. Now we move to the cloud native part. Currently, operators are becoming more open to public cloud for the BSS and monetization systems. We predict that in the future, operation platform as BSS and monetization will not only move to the cloud, but also be able to be deployed in a multi-cloud simultaneously, which means in one hand, you could put your production system in your private cloud and the disaster recovery system in the public cloud. And sometimes you deploy your system in 2 different public cloud vendors just to make sure you don't be locked in by a single.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Clark. It's very interesting. So I'm aware of the fact that we've had this discussion without really talking about the network, and obviously the network is a key foundational requirement for new services. So I wonder if I could just bring in Franco here. Franco, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
So I think a lot of the work that you do is around analytics in the network, basically making the network more efficient to help deliver these new services.
Yeah, no, you're right, Mark. And let me just try to answer the point about the revenue growth enabler. Regardless that the new revenue will come from consumer or from enterprises or business to business. At the end of the day, what everybody of us are looking for flexible, high quality, high performance, secure, and with a fair price type of service. And that's what the people want, everybody. At the end of the day, to get this, we have to really arrive to a full automation of the network, together with the full automation of the services and the full automation of all the tools that stay on top to manage fundamentally the network and the services. It seemed easy to say, but in reality it's very difficult because we are thinking about a horizontal automation, but also vertical automation without that. And that's exactly what we are trying to do. I mean, we've been in this business as a vertical for many years, providing good planning tools, good testing tools, good performance monitoring, fault management, good insurance, a monetization tool. Now, what we are doing, we are really connecting all the pieces together to create the horizontal automation that are necessary to ensure that when you subscribe a service, you get exactly what you want with the full automation.
So I guess the importance of that, Franco, is that if we're doing services such as network slicing, you have to have an SLA around what you're providing. So it's even more important than before.
Correct, absolutely. And then it's something that you don't have just to wait to have a problem. You have to predict this and design since the day one. From the day one, you have to design the network and the service system and delivery system to be automated from the maintenance since day one. You know, until now, OSS, BSS2 has been separated by the network on the same. Now everything has to become part of the same automation logic.
Franco, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Franco. So, Rob, I hope you're still there. So Rob, you know, the theme around automation is increasingly a theme that's driving how telcos evolve their network, their IT architectures. How do you think about the importance of automation and linking that into revenues for new services?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think I mean, coming from our perspective, we think about automation as a layer on top of core enterprise systems, and there's always this challenge: do you automate inside the system or do you automate over the top? I think our point of view is by sitting on the outside, we can provide an ability, and we're seeing our customers use this to rapidly recompose their systems to offer new services, things that weren't even conceived of when those systems were commissioned, and they can do all of that without the expensive business of digging up the digital tarmac.
Yeah.
And I think by putting the right tools close to the business, where the innovation is conceived, where the need is felt, and solutions can be thought through, we're seeing that automation fabric, that automation layer, really delivering in terms of speed of deployment. So it's not just about cost saving with automation, but crucially, it's about time to market and therefore time to revenue.
I guess the important thing for you is getting conversations with the revenue people in the business rather than just the network and the IT guys.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. So, guys, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Now, Dean and I, as I mentioned, we need to rush off to the main stage, but we're going to leave you in the very capable hands of our colleague, Joanne Taff. So Joanne is just going to sort of wrap up this session for us. So Joanne, are you there?
I am indeed.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Joanne.
Oh, no, thanks, Mark and Dean. That was great.
Good. So glad you enjoyed it. So, Dean and I are now going to shoot off. We'll leave you with Joanne. Thanks for your time today. And we'll run another session in November, so please join us again. But thanks, everybody. Speak soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks especially to the panelists for taking part. It was really interesting to see the report's findings on future growth, and great to hear your thoughts. There were some fantastic insights. Dean and Mark, as they just explained, are literally dashing downstairs to take part in the next session, which is perfecting the art of transformation. We haven't been able to get to all the questions in the chat. We'll answer them by email afterwards. And as for the report, you'll be able to receive a link to it once it's published in the next couple of weeks. And you'll also be able to download it on TM Forums Inform. So thank you again, everyone. It's been a brilliant session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of DTWS. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.